One of the biggest hurdles when you're fishing for lake trout is how to set up your depth sounder to get the best possible results. The problem is these fish, when you're jigging them, lake trout specifically, and whitefish to some degree, want to chase your lure. They will not hit a lure that is just sitting there. They're going to come up, nose it, and go right back down. So you have to be able to see where your lure is when you're going up and down, and you have to see when the lake trout is coming up. So there's a really delicate balance that you have to achieve there without getting too much interference and thermocline on your depth sounder, but at the same time getting all the information that you can and get your cadence correct. If you have a Humminbird, most of these settings should translate to your Humminbird Helix or maybe even Solix. But if you have another thing like Garmin or something else, you're gonna have to try to figure out those settings. But I'm gonna show you on this, and hopefully you should be able to drill down on those settings on your specific fish finder to figure out how it's going to work for yours. So let's get to it. As I said before, one of the most important things when you are fishing for lake trout is setting up your depth sounder correctly. If you don't have your depth sounder set up correctly, then you're not going to be able to see the fish running at your lure, and you're not going to be able to see your lure down there. Therefore, you are not going to catch many fish. The first thing you will notice is a whole bunch of interference at the top here. That is normal because we just dropped our lure, and the depth sounder is set to be highly sensitive and hasn't had a chance to compensate for that yet. Below, you will see our fishing line, and even below that, you will see a bunch of fish suspended off the bottom. These are probably whitefish because it's not very often that lake trout will be suspended off the bottom. Go ahead and hit the menu button twice. We are going to set up the 2D Chirp display frequency. And it's very important to have this on medium or medium and high frequency. You do not just want this on high frequency. You will not get enough information on your screen because high frequency has a very narrow cone. It only shows the fish directly under your boat, and you will lose fish by not being able to see fish off to the side. The medium frequency allows you to see fish that are off to the side and pick up on more details. If you can't set your sonar to high and medium frequency, make sure it's at medium frequency at the very minimum. Another very important setting is the 2D switch fire setting, and you always want this in max mode. If you turn it to clear mode, you're going to lose a lot of data on your screen, and a lot of data points will be interpreted by the Humminbird unit, and it will try to filter out what it thinks you don't need to see. Unfortunately, when we're fishing lake trout, we need to see absolutely everything. A couple little blue dots on the screen could be the start of a run when a lake trout is running at you. As you can see on the screen now, we are not seeing very much stuff. When we had max mode on, we saw a lot of stuff. Yes, it cleared the interference at the top, but that interference would have cleared up given another 5 or 10 minutes anyways. The problem is with clear mode, as you can see, we can't really see anything here. So let's go and set it back to max mode to see what that looks like and compare it. As you can see, a lot more data is displayed on the screen. Fish that were originally not even there in clear mode can now be clearly seen. Now you can see some fish that are off to the side coming back into view, and you can also see the bait ball up at the top. I'm going to go ahead and switch it back to clear mode here. And you can see in clear mode, we lost a lot of that data again. So always keep it in max mode. You will lose fish by fishing in clear mode. Another important setting is the Rts window. RTS stands for real-time sonar, and it allows you to see sonar returns in real time using the small vertical window on the right. Everything to the left of the Rts window is historic data. In other words, it is showing what has already happened and is not real time. Think of this like a desktop printer printing words on a sheet of paper. There are two main settings that you should choose from when hunting lake trout: the color A scope setting and the color full setting. But deciding between these two settings is mostly preference and what looks best to your eye. You may also set the RTS window to off, but I do not recommend this as now you have less pertinent information on the screen to help you make split-second decisions. What is the difference between these two, you may ask? In the color full mode, sonar returns are returned in color and fill the entire width of the RTS window. Alternatively, the color A-scope setting still returns real-time sonar data, but the line width within the RTS window is representative of the intensity of the sonar return data point. My preference is to use the color A-scope mode, as this looks best to my eye. The medium sensitivity offset is another important setting to dial in on your fish finder. Typically, you'll only have this setting if you have a dual beam sonar, meaning you have both high and medium frequencies available to you. It represents the range of your medium frequency range in reference to your high frequency range. Because I already have the sonar at an extremely high sensitivity along with the 2D switchfire in max mode, I keep my medium sensitivity offset extremely low. Anywhere between a value of -8 and -5 works well for me. However, you'll have to dial this in on your specific fish finder to find out where the sweet spot is. Remember, we're trying to get as much relevant data on the fish finder without introducing a lot of unuseful data. Now that we've set most of the advanced core settings on your sonar, we can now turn our attention to the settings that we use 99% of the time when fishing to quickly dial in the sensitivity. If you press the menu button once while you're in the 2D sonar view, you will be presented with a small window that allows you to control the 2D sensitivity and the 2D contrast, among other settings which we'll cover shortly. When using the 2D sensitivity option, you want to dial it in so that you can barely see the blue interference throughout the water. This means you are capturing all the data you can possibly capture just before the signal to noise ratio gets out of control and makes your chart unreadable. Remember, these lake trout move extremely quickly, and sometimes the only hint of one starting to run at your line is a few small blue dots that are barely noticeable. I'll demonstrate this later with a few real fish runs after we get through the rest of the basic settings. If you don't have your sensitivity set very high, you won't see the run in time and you will not be able to respond, which ultimately leads to a missed hookup. I typically leave mine around 17, but many factors will influence where the sweet spot for the setting is. Factors such as water clarity, depth, wind, waves, motor noise, and the positioning of your sonar on your boat will all have an overall effect, and you'll need to adjust this setting almost hourly to get the best possible chart readability. The 2D contrast option is more of a personal preference. It adjusts the color between the strong and weak sonar returns. I typically leave mine around 23, which allows me to see the large or slow-moving fish that generate a strong sonar return as red on my chart, and small or quick-moving fish that generate a weak sonar return as green or blue. When a lake trout runs at my lure very quickly, it will show as an almost vertical blue line, which I'll demonstrate in a moment. You can adjust this value to whatever you feel works for your eyes. I promised you that once we were done with the core settings, that I'd show you in real time what it looks like when a lake trout runs at your lure with properly dialed in settings. Then I'll contrast that same run with improperly tuned settings so you can see the difference. On the screen, there is a lure around a depth of 90 feet. A lake trout has moved off the bottom and is interested in the lure. Since the settings are dialed in properly, we can clearly see the trout start to make a run at the lure, and we're able to respond properly and in time. Now let's back that run up and detune the settings to show what it looks like with improper settings. Because this was a calm day with no waves, you can still see the beginning of the run, but you lose a lot of detail once the trout is higher in the water column, and notice that you can't even see the lure any longer. This is not what we want, and you will catch less fish with bad settings on your sonar. Now let's look one last time at that lake trout run, but this time with the good settings on the left and the bad settings on the right. It pays to take some time to learn your fish finder and really dial in those settings. Bad settings mean less fish, period. There are a few more minor settings that will help you dial in your charts for maximum lake trout fishability. Since lake trout are a bottom-dwelling fish that run at your lure from 100 feet or more, we are much more interested in the depth below 30 feet. Typically, lake trout will not chase you above 30 feet or so. Even if they do, you just keep reeling if you haven't seen the fish drop off yet. so anything above 30 feet we're really not interested in. Therefore, to zoom in on the depth that we are interested in, I suggest setting your upper range on your fish finder to 30 or 40 feet. If you have a Humminbird, you will first need to ensure that the user mode under the setup menu is set to custom instead of angler. Press the menu button twice and scroll over to the setup tab by hitting the right or left keys. If the user mode is set to angler, you will not be able to set the upper range on your chart. Very odd. I have no idea why they decided to take that option away from the angler mode. Once the user mode is set to custom, press exit and then the menu button again, and you will now be able to set the upper range on your chart. If you have a jigging mode, you'll want to set it to on. Jigging mode allows the Humminbird unit to track your lure much better because it prioritizes the 2D chart mode. Without getting too technical, it allows the transducer to prioritize the sonar pulses for 2D imaging and put less emphasis on sonar pulses for other features, such as side imaging. The last and final setting is the chart speed. When lake trout run at your lure, split seconds matter. Therefore, you want to set the chart speed to its maximum value of 10, or whatever your fish finder will allow. Now, you'll get the maximum amount of updates and be able to read and react as quick as possible to any fish movements. And that's it. We covered all the main settings that you need to dial in on your Humminbird fish finder or any type of fish finder to jig for lake trout and other bottom-dwelling fish. I hope you found this video helpful, and if it was, then please take some time to congratulate me for my efforts by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me and is the digital way of giving me a high five and saying thank you. Now the only thing left for you is to get out there on the water and practice, dialing in your fish finder and catching some big fish. Good luck.